Hi guys, it's Kelly. We are going to be using some products from Concord 9th today. This is from their newest release, and it's going to be the Best Banners, Love Always, and Love Notes stamp sets. They have a bunch of fun dies that came out too, but I'm just concentrating on using the stamp sets, and actually not even that many stamps today. So I have a craft friend who tells me all the time anything can be a flower. Literally anything can be a flower. And I was like, that seems questionable, but I was willing to give it a go because in the, I think it's the Love Always stamp set, there is this beautiful stripe, and I am like totally in love with this stripe, and I want to put the stripe on all the things, and I really saw it in my head with bright florals. Bright watercolored florals. So I really didn't have any idea how I was going to make that happen until I started looking at stamp sets. And so I was like, well, anything can be a flower. I have these heart stamps here and this little accent, which maybe could be leaves. So that's what we're doing here, folks. We are turning these hearts into flowers. So you saw me use a die just as a guideline for my circle. I knew I wanted them to be kind of catty corner to each other, diagonal. And so here I stamped one full strength. Don't do that. Please don't do that. But I'm inking them up with distress inks, and then I'm stamping them off one time because it's easier to move the color. If you stamp them down full strength like I did there, it's harder to move it. And you'll see once I have my stamping complete. I did it with a set of leaves too, and I'll show you how I try to move that around. But it is more difficult. But anyway, this little accent has 3 little accents on it, and I thought that it could be leaves. So I'm not being really super careful about how I'm inking up my stamps. I'm just kind of putting it in a couple of different colors and then putting them down where I think they would make a pretty floral arrangement. Now, after I was done stamping, I liked the arrangement even with the hearts. So that's something that's an option too. Or you could, stamp the hearts and then outline them. But I really wanted watercolor flowers. That was just what I had in my mind. So now I'm working on my Ranger craft sheet. I put down the little piles of distress ink on the craft sheet because I'm going to use them to add color. I'm using a number 2 round brush and just a little bit of water to start moving that pigment around. And then I'm going to put down clean, clear water. As much clean as you put it out as far as you want the ink to bloom. So I wet the initial color, rinse off my brush, go in with clean, clear water, and soften whatever side I want to kind of bloom out. In this particular card, I softened almost all of the sides because I was trying to make them bigger or more than what they were. But if you have a floral stamp that you're doing this with, you can leave some hard edges, and that's really, really pretty, and the variation is kind of awesome. But because I was looking to make them more florals when they're actually hearts, I really had to kind of what I call let the water blossom a lot more than maybe I normally would. You can see that leaf stamp on the left hand side is where I stamped at full strength. But then from there, I'm just going to pick up the color that's on my quote-unquote palette, and I'm going to start dropping color in. I personally like really bright, bold color, and especially if I'm going to be using it with black, I feel like that black makes those colors pop so much. So you're going to see me periodically just keep adding color to this larger flower. And here I'm kind of playing around with how big I think it should be. I did erase the pencil line underneath where I stamped. I don't know if I showed that or not, but that's important because you won't be able to erase it once you put your watercolor down. So make sure you're erasing your circle or whatever shape that you decide to use before you start stamping, especially if you're doing we're not doing copic coloring, but if you're doing any kind of copic coloring or any kind of watercoloring, you won't be able to use that or remove that pencil once you put color on top of it. So here I'm going to start trying to move this pigment around for the ones I stamp full strength. And you can see how much darker they are than everything else. And even though I can get the pigment to flow, I can't get rid of that stamped shape. So I'm going to have to disguise it with other colors, with trying to make those things blossom out. The other ones worked out much better because I did stamp them what they call second generation. So just keep that in mind. The second generation is super important. And again, we're going to go back in and add more color to the ones that I've already done while they're still wet, so that everything's blending kind of nicely together. I really, really love the carved pumpkin and the pick raspberry together. It makes a super, just a really nice coral color. And then if you get a little crazy with the water, you don't like the way the shape is, it's getting too big or too loose, you can just go in with a dry paper towel or cloth, whatever you have handy, and blot those things up, and it'll stop the movement, and it will also soak up the pigment. So usually there's a pretty good way, even if you get crazy with the water, there's still a way to fix that as long as it hasn't dried. So just like I said, periodically going in, adding more color until they're the intensity that I like. I wasn't being real particular about how it flowed. I have a tendency to be really controlling. People who know me in real life probably will not be shocked by that news. But especially with my watercolor, like I want them to look a certain way. And this technique really works best if you just embrace it for what it is. Just understand that you're not going to have a ton of control. It's going to be kind of loose. We're making flowers out of hearts, which I think is a really cool idea. I love anything that lets you stretch your stamps. And for me, this definitely was a way to get more, or to be able to create something that I had in my head with the products that I had on hand. And so, that's just something for you guys to think about, like what you have that you can use. And when you purchase a stamp set, you're spending your hard-earned cash, all them dollars you making, you're spending all that money. And so I really feel like if I can help you get more out of what you've purchased, then I'm totally happy to do that. And then also do it for myself. This this hobby is wonderful. And I love that, to be able to share that kind of creativity. So as long as your images are still wet, you can go back and build up that intensity of the color for as long as they're wet. If they start to dry out and you want to change something, just add more water. Distress inks are so forgiving. Really, really forgiving. And you can just kind of keep toying with them until you're happy with what you have. So I just kept kind of messing around with it. I have one more leaf I have to kind of bloom out from there. And then also those leaves that I stamped full strength, you can still see that one on the right, like, is still pretty much, it's got like a green halo, but it's still pretty much perfectly stamped. There isn't a whole lot you can do about it besides trying to wet it, suck up the pigment, wet it again, distract with other colors. But so I just kept kind of messing with it and adding to it. That was a very quick snapshot of it completed wet, and then we're moving on to the dry portion. So I'm going to put that same die back in place. Any circle die that you have will work. We're not really using it for anything other than a guideline. If you can draw a circle, then do that. I can't. But I'm going to take a journaling pen and just outline the circle parts that aren't under the flowers. This very large sentiment is totally beautiful, and it fits the love notes die, like the front of the envelope, perfectly. But I thought that it would also be pretty cool just as a sentiment by itself on a card, and it's big enough to carry an image like this. So I'm going to ink that up, and I swear to you, I'm inking it up forever. Just nonstop. And it's because I'm stamping on the bumpy side of watercolor paper, and I want to make sure I get a good impression. So even with all of that inking, there were still parts that I missed, and that's just because of the surface. So I just stamped it a second time. Thank God for the Misty. And here you'll see my little finger tapping, because I know I want to put the stripes in the background, but I'm terrified. And in my terror, so this is liquid biscuit, and this is what I decided I'm going to use to mask my flowers. I'm putting down a really good layer. You want to make sure that this is completely dry before you do any other stamping. And you'll know it's dry because it'll be clear. You'll be able to see your image. It'll have an orange tint, but you'll be able to see your images through it. In my terror of being just absolutely horrified I was going to ruin this card, I forgot to turn on the camera when I started stamping the stripes. So I masked the circle and then started stamping. And you'll see there, I'm like, I can't believe I did that. But you can still see the idea long enough for you to see my error. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp the stripe. They're actually really easy to line up. I didn't have any issues getting like pretty good spacing between them. But this is about to happen. It's going down for real. And it moved. It moved. It moved. So can we all just have a moment of silence for the idea that I was going to have a clean outline with bright colors? Like that was going to be my card, because that didn't happen. But we shall overcome, folks. We're not starting all over. We watercolored all them hearts into flowers, and we did all this stuff and everything else. So normally with liquid biscuit, you can just rub it with your finger. I knew that I was probably going to be smearing some of that black ink. So I was nervous about letting it dry for too long because I didn't want the liquid biscuit to adhere to my watercolor paper. So I just figured I was going to have to risk it. At some point I brought in an eraser. That seemed to help better. I was constantly cleaning off my fingers in between. But I ended up just smearing, not quite a bit. I mean, it wasn't like horrific, but there are smears of black in my background. So that whole idea I had of like a super clean graphic card, out the window. Peace out. It did not happen. But it's okay. I mean, it still turned out okay. Plus, I got that weird stamping mishap at the top. So, would I add the stripes again? I would. I was actually so scared I photographed the card without the stripes, because I was like, if I totally just ruin this, I gotta have something. So, thankfully, it ended up working out okay in the end, just because, you know, perseverance and all of that. Don't mind my head. What I decided to do was use my T-square ruler to give myself a straight line, and my writing pen to like block those things in. And then what I ended up doing was I just combined two of the stamps, like where it's messy. Two of the stripes. I combined two of the stripes to just make a thicker line, so that it would look purposeful. I still don't even know if it looks purposeful. Whatever. I was trying to save my card, folks. That we were in a situation. So I'm using that pen, like I said, to give me a guideline so I stay with the straight line. There was a little area that I could not include. Like I would have had to have made like a 1.5 inch stripe, and I wasn't about to do that. So I just let it be a little bit messy. But using this black Copic to fill that in, I already have a guideline for the circle. I was just very careful about where I was coloring, and that ended up working out okay. But because I wanted it to look intentional, I did the two at the top where I needed to, and then I just picked a random two stripes closer to the bottom to fill those in, and it made it look a little more put together, like those large stripes were on purpose, even though we both know I was a poor stamper, and that's not what happened. So from here, some of the stamping, because of that liquid biscuit, was not as solid. I filled it in with that Copic, and then I had to worry about those smudges. Like, I know they're probably hard to see on camera, but I could see them in real life. And the way I decided to fix it was to add a drop shadow. I knew it would give me some grays in the background. But it's kind of hard to give a shadow to watercolor flowers. They're not supposed to be that, I don't know, that solid. They're not supposed to carry that much weight. But decisions were made. It is what it is. So I'm outlining them in the C5 and then blending that out with the C3, and then finally I'll switch over to the C1. And that really did kind of disguise those black smudgy areas that I had. I'm going to further try to disguise them with some clear Wink of Stella. I added a couple of white and black dots to the center of my flowers just to give them a middle. And then that's the whole card. So it was interesting, and I'm glad that I did it. I really liked the way that the card looked at the end, but it was just like a little trial and error. So don't be afraid to try some things that maybe are like outside of your comfort zone. Just make sure, you take photographs in between in case you have something that doesn't work out. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye.